Are we well lit?
Yeah, I would say.
Mark's always a little lit.
There's a little halo above Mark, but I mean...
Hello, I am Mark Humbert, along with Cameron Garber and Melody Bateman. I'm here with Body Smart. So today, this is another episode of Keeping Runners on the Road, and we're continuing the topic of some of those tips for masters athletes, things that we want to pay attention to in terms of training, nutrition, all the things that we want to consider in making sure that we have the best performance throughout a lifetime of training.
Yeah. So one of the things we've done recently is we've taken this course on the Masters Athlete. We're always trying to improve and learn the latest, greatest research and information. So we've taken this course on the Masters Athlete. And so we're just trying to share some of the things that we've been learning. And honestly, I've been pleased to see that a lot of it's stuff that we already know or like preach. And so that's always reaffirming.
So basically, we're really smart.
Yeah. I mean, but it does help to know that like what we're telling people like is still in line with the latest information, as well as it really gives us great ideas of what to talk about that we already kind of share with patients, but sometimes it's hard to put into words on camera of what we should say and be telling our audience. And so we're kind of using some of the course material as a framework. And so we're really excited to share some of these tips for the Masters Athlete with you guys. So all of it is good stuff and really in line with what we were talking about. We hammer strengthening all the time in our videos, like why everybody should be strengthening all the time. And like this whole video that was about why you need to be strength training and how you to manage your loads as an athlete, as a Masters Athlete. So Masters Athlete being kind of more older or more experienced runners.
Let's go with let's say more experienced.
More experienced runners. People that have run more mileage. Because as Indiana Jones would say, it ain't the years, darling, it's the mileage.
I'm so glad you pulled that in here.
What video is not complete without an Indiana Jones reference?
That's what
Here
I'm saying.
All right.
So no, I love, I mean, we're always talking about strength training here.
Yeah.
So one of the things we will, we'll link a picture. We were talking about this earlier. So it's amazing what happens in our muscles when we don't continue to strength train throughout our entire life. Yeah. And so one of the, it's kind of it's a scary image. So it shows the cross section of the thigh muscles in I think it was about 74-year-old, right? Triathlete versus sedentary. And the size of the muscles is drastically different. But not only that, but some of the other things that happen when we don't exercise regularly is fat actually begins to infiltrate the muscle, which means that it does a poorer job at its main job in terms of contracting and producing force. And so like, I think that's like such a great visual representation of like, oh my goodness, I've got to get on that.
Right. The difference is like one looks like just a big hunk of meat and the other looks like a marbled ham. Like it's pretty crazy. Like the difference in that cross-sectional look at it, how much fat has infiltrated not only around the outside of it, but also up into the different parts of the muscle tissue. Pretty crazy.
And we know that there's already age-related changes in terms of muscle, how we synthesize muscle, how quickly it breaks down, the size of the individual fibers. Untrained, that can lead to pretty drastic muscle mass losses, especially after the age of about 60. It just accelerates.
Which leads to performance and strength losses, right?
Exactly, which we want to avoid. And also just more higher risk of injury, right? When our muscles, our bones and tendons aren't strong, then we're more liable to get injuries. We harp on that in pretty much every video, but it's because it's a concerning trend that we see, and it's incredibly preventable. Putting the amount of training that we have to put in terms of sessions of strength training per week is pretty minimal in terms of the effects that it creates in our body. Right. It does take some time to develop those adaptations, right? We always push the high load, lower repetition way of loading. And that is important. That's what we're going to do. That's going to drive those most important changes. But we do need to allow time for our body to adapt. So what we're not saying is go pick up the heaviest weights and just start swinging them wildly, right? We need to...
I thought I was going to get punched there for a second.
We need to develop the technique, the form, and improve our brain's ability to speak to the muscles in terms of producing force. And then as we adapt, we focus on those high loads to drive the important changes in terms of muscle fiber size, ability to produce force, things like tendon stiffness, right? Allowing our tendons to act as springs, store and release energy well. And so super, super, super training across the entire lifespan, but particularly as we are looking at the master's athlete.
Yeah, it's super important to maintain that strength so that it doesn't drop off quite as rapidly as we age. There's going to be some strength loss, but you can really curtail that curve quite a bit by doing the strength training. There's another tip in there, though, in the video of how to maintain our progress so that we see that drop off, right? And people just assume that's just part of getting old and aging. And so we accept that.
But being old is not an excuse anymore.
Right. It's true. I mean, people that are winning some of these like big events, 100-mile races, 200-mile races, are in the Masters athlete category. Even the guy that won in 2019, I went to Kona, and the guy that won was 38 years old. Right. So maybe not quite a Masters athlete, but borderline. I don't want to think of myself as a Masters athlete.
We'll just push that a little bit further. Right?
But that idea of like, you can still be performing much later into your life than what we used to think. But the key was doing enough high intensity training that was able to help keep the cardiovascular as well as muscular changes for longer into your lifespan. So intensity is really important, and how to get there to high intensity is really critical. And so that's some of the things they talked about in that video, is how do we build up to that high intensity? So what do you guys have to say about that?
So it's interesting because I know we had the discussion in changing variables, right? To modify our load, we can change the duration of the exercise, right? How long we're doing it, the frequency, right? How many times a week, or even how many times a day are we doing it? And then getting up to the intensity. And so, kind of the way in the video that it was organized was we start with duration, then frequency, and then we move into adding intensity. But there was some discussion about like which one we want to do first, and I think it's a valid question.
Right. To me personally, I would say that it should go more frequency and then duration and then intensity versus starting. Because if we build up our duration, so we're running, we build up to where we're doing an hour every time we train, and then we start working on frequency, all of a sudden we've gone from, 3 hours a week to 5 hours a week fairly quickly if we add additional days in, versus, so we went, a fairly high percentage, like a 60% increase or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or 40% increase, which is a big jump.
Math.
Whereas, math. Whereas if we do it such that we are increasing in our frequency first, so we work on getting the habit down of training every day, and we can just build a little bit each day, and then we can build the duration on each day to where like we're going to add like a quarter mile or 5 minutes to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we're going to run all 5 days, or however that. I think we can gradually progress faster rather than taking such a big leap. I don't know. That's my personal bias. I think one of the biggest problems a lot of people have is the consistency of training. So I think it maybe depends a little bit on where somebody's at. For a beginner, somebody that's just starting out as a master's athlete, they just retired, or they're empty nesters, and so they're like, I've always wanted to be a runner, just never had time, so now I'm getting out there because I'm an empty nester. It may be better to work on getting the consistency of training in first and then building the volume. Whereas somebody that's always been training, but they want to take it to that next level, then it may be the other way around.
Yeah. I think just going back to how do we best create that lifestyle? That's what we're trying to do, right? Fitness is part of a healthy lifestyle, and adopting the best approach that's going to allow you to be keep consistent. Be consistent, right?
Yep.
So that's what we always say here. Consistency is key. That's one of our core values, actually.
Right.
And so having that lifestyle, building that day in and day out is super important for making those healthy changes and maintaining them again throughout our lifespans.
Yeah.
Sorry. One thing that I want to talk about with intensity, though, is a caveat. This is one of the really interesting things that they talked about, and an idea that I wasn't familiar with previously. It's called the extreme exercise hypothesis. And it's this idea that there's some increased risk in terms of cardiovascular events when we train too often, too hard for too long. And so, I think one of the things that when people really get into the endurance world and they're particularly competing, multiple times a year, is that they want to win, right? They get that competitive spirit and they end up pushing it too hard for too long, right? They don't allow enough time for recovery. They're just spending too much time in that high intensity. And so what happens in those extreme cases is problems with the arteries, big arteries, right? The carotid arteries, the coronary arteries, right? The arteries around our heart. Those end up getting stiffer, right? So they're less able to respond to changes and to changing blood pressure like we need them to. The heart loses some of its elasticity. It gets it gets stiffer, right? We see some scar tissue to begin to develop, things like that. And so if you are someone that has historically trained really hard for really long, really often, and you're looking to get back into training, it would be a really good idea to perhaps get a graded exercise test, right? Some form of exercise EKG, so we can look at how is the heart performing, how is it responding to what we're asking of it, and making sure that we screen ourselves for risks, so that we don't end up, setting ourselves back when our aim is to build a healthy lifestyle habit, is to do something.
Yeah.
And just remembering that while endurance exercise is super beneficial, right? In terms of mood, in terms of tissue quality throughout the body, in terms of our cardiovascular system, great to a certain point, but we can't make the mistake ever as athletes that we have no risk, right? We have to be smart in all the things that we're doing. We don't want to take any area to extremes, right? Whether it's nutrition, diet, exercise, recovery, right? Like any of it. And so just being aware of some of those risk factors, paying attention to your body, and knowing when you need to ask for help is super important.
And I think one of the keys to that is how you train then. So if training too hard, too often, for too long a period of time can cause changes in your cardiovascular system that lead to disease risk, I think the key is how should we train then? And the 80-20 training, I think, is really the key. Mm-hmm. Training that 80-20, and that's in that article or in that film that we watched, like that's essentially what they came down to, is the polarization of training and making sure that your training fits that healthy lifestyle and that healthy loading is really key. And Melody, so you've been training for a while in that 80-20. What have you personally found, and how's that helped you?
Well,
and you're awesome. Not a master's athlete.
True, yes, not master's athlete.
But no, it makes a really, really big difference. So what's really cool about 80-20 is the trick is to spend a lot more time running slow, right? Yeah. And that's what I did, and it was really frustrating at first. But what was cool is after a year of running slow and getting a little bit of the high intensity in, all of a sudden I can run really, really fast. All of a sudden I can just sprint super fast, and it's like a superpower. And I feel like it didn't even work for it. It's right. It's just as awesome.
Right.
And my body feels a lot better. I feel a lot more energetic. I feel like I can go on a run and then go on throughout my day without feeling totally drained and totally beat up after every workout. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And it seems like counterintuitive that we run 80% of the time fairly slow and then only 20% of the time fast. But really the key is that when you're going fast, you're running really fast. So in the video, they recommended 95% or more. So really redlining if you're going to go fast. So 95% of your capacity or more. But then, so we're really working on the mechanics of that high end speed and the cardiovascular and muscle adaptations that we need to go that fast. And then the rest of the time, we're really just putting in the time and allowing our tissues, our muscles, tendons, ligaments, and joints to adapt to training, right? To adapt to running. And eventually our slow gets faster and faster and faster, but we're not having to beat ourselves up all the time. And it allows us to have more quality runs. And what most people do, so we recommend zone 2 for the 80%, and then zone 4 or zone 5 usually for the 20%. And what it allows you to do is have less bottom of zone 3 runs and top of zone 3, low zone 4 speed workouts. because you're less depleted, you can go up into that zone 5 and have a more quality speed workout when you do it. And so that's where that 80-20 comes in, and kind of what they were talking about in the video, that polarization of training is what we call it. Your slow should be slower than what you think, and your fast should be faster than what you think. And we tend to think as younger and older athletes, if I just go out and run a little bit faster every day, I'll get faster. And it doesn't work that way. Science has shown over and over and over again that the people that are winning events, that's not how they train. And because that's not how our body adapts. And so going slower and building up those systems and the load on our tissues so that we can adapt to it in a way that's not beating it up too much, so that we then have enough in the tank to really go hard, fast and train ourselves to become faster. That seems to produce the adaptations that we need to really perform well and to maintain our performance as a master's athlete. That's kind of hard to say. Anyway, so there's your tips.
Yeah. And I think just kind of a great overarching tip for all of this, and this is something that we talk about all the time, is listen to your body. Is that, some days it might be scheduled for a high intensity day and you're just not feeling it, right? Maybe you have a niggle in your legs, or just you didn't sleep as well the night before. You need to modulate that. And that's just like, we learn to listen to our bodies with that duration of exercise, right?
Yeah.
Building that time on the road, building that time on our feet, and learning how our bodies adapt and respond. But as we combine our own lived experience, knowing how our body works, with the best that science has to offer, then we really set ourselves up for a long, healthy lifestyle, right, and excellent performance, right? So we get to feel great and perform great when we learn to mesh those two really well. And so often that requires help, right? Maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a physiotherapist, maybe it's some other health practitioner. Maybe it's Cameron. There you go.
I don't know.
But someone that can help you figure out, what's happening with your body, and also apply the best science to give you the best chance at performing your best. Best.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. and so that's really what we try to do here, and why we try to keep runners on the road here at Body Smart. We want to help everybody stay healthy and be able to keep running. So that's what we do here. And hopefully, if you need help, we can help you out. Or if you don't live in our area, we can find somebody that can help you in your area. So we love to help runners in any way that we can. So make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and share this with somebody that that may need help as a master's athlete to really maintain and keep their performance, so that you can join us on the next episode. Though you gotta hit that like button or that follow button. All right, we'll see you on the next episode.